Welcome back to the channel. Today we need to talk about a situation that has shaken the WNBA and has a lot of fans on edge. One of the league's biggest stars, Breanna Stewart, has just made a move that doesn't only affect her own future, but could also be a warning sign about where the entire league is headed, especially with the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement hanging in the balance. Right now, negotiations between WNBA players and the league are honestly a mess. Both sides are locked in talks, but they're nowhere close to a final agreement. The players are pushing hard for what they believe is fair, and the league is digging in on its own position. And while all of that is going on behind closed doors, we're starting to see powerful reactions from the players in public. Some of the top names are already making decisions that are starting to worry fans, executives, and anyone who follows women's basketball closely. Breanna Stewart is at the center of this. The New York Liberty superstar, former MVP, and one of the faces of the WNBA just dropped what a lot of people are calling a bombshell. Instead of simply waiting to see how the WNBA's future plays out, she is committed to playing in Europe again. And not just anywhere in Europe, she's heading back to Turkey to play for Fenerbahçe Opet, one of the powerhouse clubs on that side of the world. On the surface, it looks like a star choosing to play overseas, something we've seen before. But when you look at the timing and what's going on with the collective bargaining agreement, this decision starts to take on a much bigger meaning. Stewart isn't just thinking about where she can win more trophies, she's clearly thinking about her long-term well-being, her financial security, and how uncertain things look inside the WNBA right now. Her deal with Fenerbahçe Opet is set to bring her to Turkey in April. That's not a random date. April lines up with the start of the New York Liberty preseason, so as the Liberty are supposed to be ramping up for what fans hoped would be another big run, their franchise player might be fully locked in with her European team, and that overlap has set off alarm bells everywhere because it raises a serious question: will Breanna Stewart even be available for the 2026 WNBA season? Right now, no one has a clear answer. On paper, she could try to play both, finish her commitments in Europe, and then join the Liberty afterward. But we're not talking about a minor tournament. Fenerbahçe is a top-level club that expects to compete deep into the season. That kind of schedule is brutal physically, and it's not realistic to assume a player can give 100% to two teams on different continents at the same time. So it's no surprise that a lot of Liberty fans are bracing for the possibility that Stewart might miss all or part of the 2026 WNBA campaign. To understand why this move hits so hard, you have to remember what Stewart has already done with Fenerbahçe. She's not trying something new. She's going back to a place that was incredibly successful for her. She won a championship there in 2023, came up huge in the biggest moments, and was named Final Four MVP. During that run, she put up about 21.7 points and 8 rebounds per game, numbers that show just how dominant she was in Europe. This isn't a side project for her. This is a place where she's proven she can be the best player on the floor and compete for titles. So from her perspective, returning to Fenerbahçe makes perfect sense. She knows the club, she knows the system, she knows she can win there. On top of that, the financial side is usually much stronger in elite European clubs than it is in the WNBA, especially when you factor in current CBA uncertainty. If you're one of the top players in the world, you're going to look for stability. You're going to go where your value is recognized clearly and consistently. And that brings us right back to the heart of the problem inside the WNBA. The current collective bargaining negotiations are stuck mainly on one massive issue: money, specifically how the league revenue is shared between the owners and the players. The players, through their union, are pushing for a 30% share of the league's gross revenue. That word gross is key. They want their cut based on the total revenue the league brings in, before expenses are deducted. The league doesn't want to go there. That's what attention is coming from. The WNBA has not accepted the idea of giving the players that 30% of gross revenue, and because neither side has moved enough to bridge that gap, talks are dragging on without a deal. It's reached the point where people are openly talking about what might happen to the 2026 WNBA season if nothing changes. Yes, the calendar for 2026 is already sketched out. On paper, the league has a plan, but a calendar doesn't mean much without a collective bargaining agreement in place. If the two sides can't agree on how to divide the money, how to structure salaries, and how to protect player rights, then the season itself could be in danger. That's why Stewart's move has rattled so many people. It feels like one of the league's biggest stars is preparing herself for the possibility that the WNBA might not be there for her in a stable way in 2026. You also have to remember that this isn't happening in a vacuum. Over the last few months, we've heard more and more about how tense things have become between the players in the league office. There have been comments from league officials, including NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, about the WNBA CBA negotiations. Even when those comments sound calm and diplomatic on the surface, a lot of fans and analysts feel like there's a deeper, more troubling reality underneath. The gap between what the players want and what the league is ready to give is still very wide. For the players, this is about more than just a raise. They see the growth of women's basketball. They see the rising TV ratings, the packed arenas, the new sponsorships. They know stars like Breanna Stewart, A'ja Wilson, and so many others have helped build real momentum. So from their perspective, a 30% share of gross revenue isn't some wild demand. It's a way of finally linking their pay to the success they're actively creating. On the other hand, the league is looking at expenses, investments, and long-term planning. That's why they've pushed back against that gross revenue model. But the longer they hold that line, the more frustrated the players become. And that's where you start to see decisions like Stewart's, strategic, calculated, and clearly influenced by how uncertain things look in the WNBA's near future. There's another angle to all of this that's important. WNBA players have been going overseas to supplement their income for years. That's not new, but what feels different now is the context. Before, players were traveling overseas mostly because WNBA salaries alone weren't enough to match their talent level or market value. Now, not only is that still an issue, but the very structure of the WNBA's future is in question because of the CBA talks. So instead of overseas play being just extra, for some stars it's becoming a necessary safety net, maybe even a primary focus. Fans feel caught in the middle. On one hand, they understand why someone like Breanna Stewart has to think about her career beyond just one league. On the other hand, they're watching their favorite players sign abroad and quietly wondering, are we going to lose them for a whole WNBA season? New York Liberty supporters especially have been vocal. This is a team built to contend, and Stewart is a massive part of that. If she's not fully available in 2026, the entire balance of power in the league could shift. Amid all the anxiety, Breanna Stewart herself has tried to take some of the edge off. She's spoken about how she feels more optimistic than she did before, saying she senses that WNBA owners are starting to listen more closely and actually respond to what the players are asking for. In her view, there's finally some real acknowledgement happening. Owners realizing that the players' demands aren't outrageous, they're reasonable and necessary for the league to move forward. That doesn't mean a deal is done or even close, but from her comments, you can tell what she really wants is clarity and concrete action. She doesn't want to be stuck in this never-ending limbo where no one knows what the rules will be, what the salaries will look like, or how the revenue will be shared in a couple of years. That desire for certainty is probably a huge factor in why she chose to lock in with Fenerbahce Rao instead of waiting around and hoping everything just falls into place in the WNBA. For Stewart, returning to Turkey is also a competitive decision. She's already won one championship with Fenerbahce, and she's clearly aiming for a third title with them. She doesn't go anywhere to be average. If you look at her previous run there, the scoring, the rebounding, the Final Four MVP, it's obvious she sees that environment as one where she can dominate on the court and continue building her legacy. But there's no denying that every move she makes right now also sends a message. Whether she intends it or not, her decision is a signal to the league. If you don't create a stable, fair, and financially competitive situation, even your biggest names will start looking elsewhere. That's the part that should really concern the WNBA in these CBA talks. It's one thing to argue about percentages in a boardroom. It's another thing when fans start to realize they might not see their favorite players in a WNBA jersey at all in certain years. At the same time, this isn't a case of Stewart slamming the door shut on the league. If you listen to what she said, she still wants to be in the WNBA. She still believes in the product, in the competition, and in the growth that's happening. But she's also being very realistic. Until there is a signed agreement that gives players a fair share and reliable conditions, she's not going to gamble her career on maybe. And that's really the core of what we're seeing league-wide. other stars are watching closely. They see the unresolved negotiations. They see the players' union holding firm on the 30% of gross revenue. They see the league resisting, and each of them has to make decisions about their own futures. Stewart might be the biggest name so far to commit overseas in a way that could directly clash with the WNBA season, but if things don't improve, she might not be the last. The question now is how the WNBA responds. Do they treat this as a wake-up call and find a way to bridge the gap with the players, or do they stay on their current path and risk more of their top talent exploring alternatives? Everyone involved knows what's at stake. If there's no movement on this revenue issue, if the players don't feel like true partners in the business side of the league, then the threat to the 2026 season becomes very real. From a fan perspective, this whole situation is frustrating. You want to focus on the games, on the rivalries, on the MVP races. Instead, you're forced to think about contracts, percentages, and overseas commitments. But this is the reality of modern professional sports. Behind every highlight, in every sold-out arena, there are negotiations over who gets what share of the pie. And right now, in the WNBA, those negotiations are at a breaking point. Breanna Stewart's decision to head back to Fenerbahce is not just some random off-season move. It's part of a larger picture where players are stepping up and saying, "We're going to protect our careers, whether the league is ready for that or not." She's chasing championships in Europe, securing her financial future, and at the same time putting real pressure on the WNBA to show that it values its stars appropriately. As things stand, the future of the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement, and by extension the 2026 season, is still hanging in the balance. The players want their 30% of gross revenue. The league hasn't agreed. Negotiations continue, but the clock is ticking, and the decisions players are making right now are a reminder that the consequences of inaction are very real. So as you look at Breanna Stewart suiting up for Fenerbahce, dominating in Turkey, and chasing another title, remember what's really underneath that move. It's not just about one team or one player. It's about a superstar taking control of her own future in a moment when the league she helped build is still trying to figure out how much it's willing to give back to the people who make it possible. We'll keep watching how this unfolds, because whatever happens next in these WNBA CBA negotiations is going to shape the league for years to come. And if more stars follow Stewart's lead, the message to the WNBA will only get louder. Respect the players, share the revenue fairly, and provide the stability they've earned, or risk losing them, at least for a while, to places that already do.